Welcome to Humane Voices, the official podcast of the Humane Society of the United States. Carrie and Austin here for another episode. Carrie, how you holding up?
All things considered, I think I'm doing okay. Worried about people, worried about everything out there, but trying to just get things done. You know,
I don't know what week it is.
No, time has no meaning anymore. Yeah, it stopped having a meaning about a month ago, I feel like.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Not that a month has any meaning, so I don't even know what I'm saying when I say a month ago. Maybe that was 5 months ago, who knows?
Right, exactly. Well, I'm excited to bring in our guest for today's show, Amanda Arrington, Senior Director of the Pets for Life program at the Humane Society of the United States. Amanda, thank you so much for sitting down to chat with us. We're glad you're here.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks, you guys.
Absolutely. So, to start off, I think it would be great, in your own words, how would you describe the Pets for Life program to those hearing it for the first time?
If I can make it as succinct as possible, it is about increasing equity and access to pet resources for people living in poverty and in underserved communities. That's the really brief summary of what the program is about and the philosophy that guides all of the work that we do. It's very nuanced, and I'm sure we'll get into all of the details, but that's really what we're about, is that we're trying to connect people who don't have access to the services that they want and need for their pets.
So Amanda, I think a lot of people are familiar with terms like food deserts. I mean, and this is kind of a related thing, right? Because the same places that experience the kind of systemic poverty and other lack of access that drive situations like food deserts where people can't access fresh food and good quality food, they're the same things impacting pet owners in those communities, right?
Absolutely. Food deserts is a term that most people are familiar with and understand what that means, what you just described, and it is the same thing for pet resources, that there are these pockets of high rates of poverty and where there are no veterinarians, there are no pet supply stores, there aren't even big box retailers where people can get supplies that a lot of us take for granted for their pets. And oftentimes the two overlap. Where you find food deserts, it's also where you find pet resource deserts.
Right.
So you're inching towards it now, but what are the specific services that PFL provides with your program?
So we try to be as comprehensive as possible in what it is that we provide as far as support to communities. And so it varies widely. We really have, through the evolution of the program, listened to what the community is telling us and what it is that they don't currently have and need for their pets. And so there are things that you would expect, like spay-neuter services, vaccinations, but it's also lots of supplies, like I mentioned, things like leashes, collars, litter and litter boxes, things that most of us would take for granted and think is fairly easy to get for your pets. But then it's also other services that people who are living in poverty and again in underserved areas experience a lot. The vast majority of people are renters, and so we deal with a lot of landlord issues and doing landlord interventions, pet fees and pet deposits, ways in which people engage sort of with the industry of animal welfare and companion animal welfare, so shelters, animal control agencies. We help with return to owner fees. If someone has gotten a citation, we try to help bring people into compliance. So really anything that you can think of that having a pet might make you encounter, we want to be there to support people.
I feel like I should put my cards on the table and say that this is flat out one of my favorite things that the Humane Society of the United States does. But I also have to say, it's really funny to me because for, the 20 years that I've been working here, every now and then my dad will try to give me a little bit of rubbing and be like, why are you doing all this stuff for animals? And, what about the people? And one of my favorite things about Pets for Life is that it's really helping both. I was really curious about if you could tell us a little bit about how you kind of got into this work and like what made you kind of recognize this as an issue that was impacting not only people but their pets.
I love that you said that, Carrie, because that's something we talk about every day in our work, that we really are driven not just by an animal welfare motivation, but by a social justice philosophy as well. And that animals are this reminder of how alike we are, and sort of not the differences that we have as people. And so it does just sort of bridge the divide in so many ways. And we're really proud of that. And that's something that we honor in Pets for Life. And so for me, that's sort of how I came at it, that I not to get into too deep of a backstory, but I grew up in a rural town in East Texas. And I always say that I saw the things that I didn't want in my life, or the things that I didn't want to be when I grew up. And that was in relation to animals, but also around other sort of social issues as well. And so Pets for Life was sort of this amalgamation, to be able to bring the two things together, and trying to, be of service to the world and to the immediate community around me. And thank goodness it's something that HSUS, really bought into, and we've been able to spread it around the country and now even into Canada.
Oh, that's so great.
Amanda, how's the landscape changed for PFL with COVID-19? What's happening there now?
It's sort of a two-part answer. One is that we were already positioned in Pets for Life to respond to a crisis of this manner, because we deal with the issues of access every single day. What we often say in PFL is that it's the disaster of poverty that we respond to, and that was the case before the crisis. Of course, the crisis has amplified and increased the need. So not to diminish how many people are struggling and what people are going through in an even more extreme way. But we really were in a unique position with Pets for Life to say, okay, we're a part of the community. We're on the front lines. We're in areas that have low-wage people who were hit first, hit hardest, and are going to have long-term impacts from this crisis economically, in addition to the health impacts. And so we were there, and that served us well, and being able to identify what people needed during the crisis for their pets specifically. But it has changed the way in which we go about it. The foundation of Pets for Life is building a consistent community presence and building relationships and trust with people. And we can't do that in the same way right now. We go door to door. That is a tenet of the program, is to literally meet people face to face, hand to hand, and get to know people and have people get to know us. And so we've had to adjust our outreach approach, and the way that we connect with people, staying in touch with folks, and then how do we respond as we get in new requests.
Yeah, I feel, Amanda, like this program is so perfect and so needed. I couldn't agree more with Carrie how crucial and foundational this program has been in the COVID-19 crisis, but just like you said, all the way up, leading to, and then beforehand, you already had the foundations down there. So it's amazing to see the work that you have done and is already in place. So it's amazing to hear. The other question that I had too is, and Carrie, you spoke about it a little bit, but we talk about how families loving their pets is, of course, universal. So what are the regular resources that aren't available to these communities? We talked about, how we have these food deserts and these veterinary care deserts. Are those the main resources that we're seeing that are a little scarce?
There are the veterinary resources that we've talked about. There are their supplies, and there's also just information and positive engagement. We are providing tangible support to people for their pets, but oftentimes just being there for people is as important, if not more, and especially during the COVID-19 crisis, for people to know that we are there if they need us, for people to reach out and just to have someone to listen. And to understand what their struggles are. That's just as important in the work that we do. But for the specific services, it's extremely difficult to see the lack of resources that people have for their pets, but for themselves as well. The communities that we work in, when we start in a new market, we do an in-depth community assessment to identify where the highest concentrations of poverty exist, and then where there are the least access to resources. And so people are underserved in every way that you can imagine, not just with their pet services. And for people to have a program like Pets for Life show up day after day on their street, on their block, at their front door, it means more than what I can even articulate.
Amanda, it would be great if you could say a little bit more about that, because I think my understanding is that one of the challenges for a lot of the communities that Pets for Life works in is that they are places that frequently have been kind of let down and betrayed by the services that should be equally accessible to all citizens, and yet they haven't been. And so one thing I'd love you to talk a little bit more about is sort of the consistency and how sort of Pets for Life makes the approach and kind of, builds trust and builds relationships in the community.
Trust is everything to our work, our reputation, and that people know we are there without any agenda except for to be of service. That is what makes the program successful, because there's such a history and a present sort of consequence of what communities we're serving have been through. And that's something that we take very seriously amongst our team with Pets for Life, and then our mentorship partners that we work with, the local groups around the country, in building our understanding and being informed on what the economic impacts have been on people, but also sort of the racial and ethnic history that so many of the communities we serve have experienced and are still experiencing. So we started years ago in the program of really making a purposeful effort to have that historical context and to see how the communities that we serve ended up the way that they look today. That these are not things by accident that happened, that oftentimes it was government sanctioned. And so just understanding everything from redlining to mass incarceration, to the education disparities. There's so much that we really needed to understand as animal welfare advocates, that if we were serving companion animals, we needed to really have a deeper understanding of what the people connected to the animals had experienced and were still going through.
So how does that training work then? Do you have like volunteer boots on the ground, or do you have, people in each state working together? And how does that training process work for folks that are interested in this work?
So for our official mentorship partners, we have started the program in over 50 communities around the country, and just recently started in Ontario. And for that, we have a very in-depth onboarding process. So when a group is signing on as an official partner, there's a written agreement. If you're using the Pets for Life name, it's a registered trademark of HSUS. And so there are things that you have to adhere to, and there's integrity in the approach that you must follow. And so we do a 2-day training in one of our PFL communities where the program is currently operating. And usually that's in our 2 flagship markets of Los Angeles and Philadelphia. And then we do a 2-day training in the market where the organization is, so we can work with all of their staff. We can meet with board of directors. We can, meet with veterinary partners and try to be, really all encompassing and people understanding what the Pets for Life program is about and what's expected in being a Pets for Life partner. And then we have sort of the unofficial trainings as well, whether that's at Animal Care Expo. We have a whole track of workshops. We do statewide or regional day-long trainings. So we work with our state directors at HSUS in doing that. And so we try to have a variety of ways in which we can push out this information. We also have tools that are available for free on animalsheltering.org, our community outreach toolkit, our sustainability guide. We really try to find all kinds of ways that we can start to get the field of animal welfare to be thinking about and taking seriously these issues.
Amanda, one of the things I was really curious about was whether, the way that we're having to interact with other people during this pandemic, how has it impacted how you guys are actually doing the work? Because I think that your normal approach, if I'm not mistaken, is that you actually literally go door to door and talk to people personally and kind of build those relationships. But now that you have the relationships in place, how are you able to kind of do this in kind of this virtual space and the sort of social distance space that we have to occupy right now?
There have been some major adjustments that we've had to make because our community outreach is the core of the Pets for Life program, and it's where everything else sort of comes from. Is we have to have those relationships. We have to build trust with people and with communities for our program to be successful. And so not being able to do the door-to-door, the block by block and street by street outreach, it's definitely a significant shift for us. But because we have focused on having that community presence and on not only getting to know people, but making sure people know us, we've been able to stay in touch. So we're doing something that we call armchair outreach now, which is calling and texting people instead of going to their homes. And when we have to make deliveries, which we're doing a lot of pet food deliveries right now, we're doing no contact deliveries. So we have one person on our team going out at a time, so we don't have more than one person in a vehicle. So we have social distancing between our staff. They call or text people before we get to their home, so people are inside and they're not outside to have any sort of interaction. And we drop the food or the supplies at their front door, on their front porch, on their stoop. And then, we leave and let people know that it's there so they can go out and get it right away. So we've made some modifications to that outreach, but we have so many people that we've already built those strong relationships with that we're able to connect with people. And we prioritized because in Los Angeles and Philadelphia, in each of those communities, we have over 30,000 people that we have served to date. So we wanted to make sure we connected with the senior clients and people who we knew had pre-existing health conditions, animals that we knew had specific health concerns. So we contacted those in the first couple of weeks and made sure that we were able to provide people food for the next couple of months so they wouldn't have to leave their homes and expose themselves. And then we're just slowly working through those lists. And then we have other markets where, the program is much newer, and so they don't have as many people. So they're connecting with who's in our Pets for Life database, but then also reaching out to community partners and making sure that people have our information if they need it. And in every community, we are still getting in new requests every single day. So then we're responding to those in the same way.
Yeah. So I'm sure that with your experience with this program, you've had so many just impactful stories about coming out from the communities and the people that you've worked with. Have there been any standouts, either in the COVID-19 crisis that you found, or just over the course of your work with this program? I mean, I'm a sucker for nostalgic moments. I'm just sure that there's so many here.
I knew that question would be asked, and it's the hardest question to answer because over the years, there are so many just moving stories and amazing people and animals that we've met and just heartwarming situations. So it is tough to pull out one or two, but oftentimes something that happened most recently will be top of mind for me. And so there is a situation in Philadelphia where we had a brand new person reach out to the program, so not someone that we had known before, and whose cat had a blockage. And veterinarians are hard to access, like we've talked about, for the communities that we serve in good times. But right now, with so many vet offices being closed or having limited hours, and a lot of prices are much higher right now, and understandably so, because of the lack of PPE and all of the sort of overhead that veterinarians are experiencing. The cost to treat her cat for this woman, Victoria, was just too high. Her cat is Ginger, but we were able to work with one of our longtime vet partners who was giving us limited hours to get the cat in and to do an exam, and then they gave us a really good fee for the surgery that had to be performed. And we have some just great pictures of the cat with her person, and just they're very, very sweet. But I would say, sort of more historically of the program, the situations that are the most moving to me are ones where either someone they were at risk of being in trouble for something that they weren't able to comply with the law or an ordinance. And we were able to not only bring someone into compliance and remove that worry and that stress from their life, but to even show the service providers and those of us doing the work that oftentimes what we might label as irresponsible or maybe not the best pet owner, it's really about resources and about access. And so when we can shine a light on that, I think it teaches all of us a different way to view the work that we do. And then I'll say the final piece is not a very happy one, but one of the most important services that we offer is humane euthanasia. And that's something that, again, I think a lot of us take for granted, and having that available to us if and when the time comes, if you have a pet, it will inevitably. And that is something that the people that we serve have rarely, if ever, had the opportunity to make that decision for their animal. And so if you've ever experienced it with one of your pets, you know what it means to sort of be, to just have the capability in making the decision and feeling confident with that, even if it's a struggle. And so when we're able to provide that to people, it is one of just the most necessary services. It's something that we've really prioritized as a program, and it is what we've seen makes the most difference and means the most to people.
It's wonderful. Amanda, what is the, I mean, I'm sure that the work that you're providing for them is just life-changing, like you're saying. And so what stories of gratitude have you seen from the folks that you've helped? Are there I'm sure that there's a huge impact there in their everyday life.
It is, and I think, though, that we receive just as much as what we give in the program. And that is important to note, that there's just very few things in life, I feel, that you are able to just, sort of without asking for anything in return, provide somebody. And that's what we get to do in PFL. So I know I feel lucky, and we hear it from our team all the time, just how lucky they feel in being able to serve their community in the way that they do through the program. But yes, for people receiving services, we get tears of gratitude on a daily basis of people that just say, without this program, I don't know what I would have done. I don't know how I would have fed my cat. I don't know how I would have gotten my dog spayed. I don't know, what I would have gone through and what maybe I would have had to sacrifice in order, to provide a service, or just what my pet would have gone without. And then what that just sort of means emotionally and psychologically to people. So the appreciation and the gratitude is frequent and it's common. But I will say that sometimes the people who maybe aren't as open and don't wear their heart on their sleeve, they're not as sort of willing to be vulnerable, those are the people that I appreciate the most, the ones that make us work for it a little bit. In doing this program, for almost 10 years now, we have some folks that it took us years in order to get to a place where, we really were able to connect with someone or sort of have someone show us what the program meant. We just had a story about that this week, actually, in Milwaukee. Wisconsin Humane Society is one of our longtime mentorship partners. They were in the first round of groups to do the PFL work as a mentorship partner. And they have a man who they were delivering pet food to this week, and a dog. They've known the dog now and the man for 7 years. And they said probably for the first 9 months, he just would not open his door. So they got to know every neighbor and every person around him, and they knew that there was a dog. So they didn't give up. They kept going back, leaving information. And now, 7 years later, they're just the best of friends. When they delivered food this week, that's what he told him. He said, I didn't want to like you guys, but you're my family.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that there's so much awful stuff kind of happening during this pandemic, and just, I don't want to downplay that, but one thing that I do hope that might come out of it a little bit is a little bit of understanding and empathy from people, because now, to a much less degree and a much more temporary degree, but we're all experiencing a small part of the lack of access that people who are in these communities experience all the time. And I know I see people complaining about like even these minor inconveniences on social media all the time. And so I'd hope that one of the things that would come out of this is sort of an understanding that a lot of what, the judgments people make about people in communities that don't have these resources, that it has nothing to do with character or their compassion for their animals. It is totally an access issue.
Yes, very much so. It is the bright spot that I'm trying to remind myself of every day. I think we have to find silver linings in this crisis. And that is one I've seen so far, and I hope will continue, where people do have maybe an acknowledgement that didn't exist before. And I've seen it some just in talking about the stimulus amount. It's $1,200, and I've heard conversations, people saying that, how did that amount become, the decision, and how did they arrive at $1,200? And when people find out that $1,200 is what someone making minimum wage working 40 hours a week brings home, you can see the surprise on people's faces. They had just never thought about that before. Yep. And now people are saying, how, if I'm, temporarily unemployed and struggling financially, how am I supposed to exist and live on $1,200 a month? And people are saying, okay, so this is what tens of millions of people yep. have to deal with every single day when there isn't a crisis. So I hope that there's going to be like those little nuggets that stay with people, and especially within our field, but I think overall in society too, to just have more empathy and to really extend compassion to people. And one of the things we talk about in our work are the myths of poverty. One of those myths is that if you do live in poverty, it's because you made a bad decision, because you did something bad. And I think that this crisis has showed that that is not at all the reality.
Yeah, totally.
Well, what interesting information we're finding here, and heartwarming stories that we're gathering from the program. It seems like it's going stronger than ever. What is the future looking like for PFL?
Well, we still have dreams of, total world domination, and, we're working our way steadily to that.
I can get behind that.
No, but there's some real tangible things that we are very excited about what's to come, and some things that we had planned for in 2020 before the COVID-19 crisis that it might take a little bit longer for us to roll out. And one of those is talking about diversity, equity, inclusion within animal welfare, that there's a real need for us to have a reckoning of sorts within our field around DEI issues. And we've taken a look at that, and we've talked about it a lot within Pets for Life over the last few years, and we're seeing a positive response from the field of people saying, okay, yeah, it's time that we've got to discuss like where our movement has come from, what we've done really well, but where can we improve? And that's one of the areas that we see. It's not only the right thing to do, but it's going to make us much more effective in our movement, and we're going to be of better service to the animals the more we have varied backgrounds and different ways of thinking, and just sort of a lot of different minds at the table, and that hasn't always been the case. So that's something totally that we're working on, and we're really taking a hard look too at where animal welfare has either directly or indirectly contributed to upholding some systems of oppression. That there are things that, when we don't have sort of that diverse perspective, or people who have different experiences sharing that with us, we oftentimes can then make policy, create programming that really isn't taking into account all of the people that will be impacted. And so that's another area that we're really focusing on in Pets for Life.
That's great.
Wonderful. All right. Well, Amanda, thank you so very much for sitting down and chatting with us today. That's all we have for today's show. Be sure to follow HSUS and HSI on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and the website humanesociety.org for the latest info. You can also message podcast@humanesociety.org and send us your reactions, questions you have, and topics that you want to hear for our next episode. See you next time on Humane Voices.
Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.